Hello and welcome to India Business Hour. I'm Parikshit Luthra. Here are the headlines we are tracking this evening. At least 270 bodies recovered after the Ahmedabad Air India crash. The agonizing wait for grieving families continues as authorities work on matching DNA samples before returning the bodies. The government orders a high-level probe into the Air India crash led by Union Home Secretary. Aviation Minister says the probe will be completed within 3 months. The government launches inspection of the Boeing 787 fleet in India. Aviation Minister says 8 out of 34 aircraft have been inspected so far. Sources in Air India say both engines of the ill-fated aircraft were inspected 2 months ago and no issues were reported. Iran strikes back at Israel with hundreds of ballistic missiles. This after Israel targeted nuclear sites and Iran also killing top military commanders. 3 people have been killed in Israel. Tehran says 78 people have died due to Israeli strikes. United States helps Israel intercept missiles from Iran. President Trump says he was aware of Israel's plans to attack Iran. Israel warns Tehran will burn after the retaliatory strikes. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set to attend the G7 summit in Canada. He will visit Cyprus tomorrow and will also visit Croatia. After multiple delays, the Axiom 4 mission is set for liftoff on the 19th of June. The mission will carry Indian astronaut Shubhanshu Shukla and 3 others to the International Space Station. South Africa pull off a stunning upset to be crowned World Test Champions, beat Australia by 5 wickets at Lord's after a remarkable century by Aiden Markram. At least 270 bodies have been recovered after the Ahmedabad Air India crash. The agonizing wait for grieving families continues as authorities work on matching the DNA samples before returning the bodies. Several bodies have been charred beyond recognition. Authorities say DNA samples are essential to identify the victims. They say it takes up to 36 to 48 hours to complete one DNA test. The government has ordered a high-level probe into the crash led by the Union Home Secretary. The team will include officials from the Aviation Ministry, the Indian Air Force and Gujarat state government officials as well. The Aviation Minister said that the probe will be wrapped up in 3 months. The Minister also said that the Boeing 787 fleet in India is under inspection. 8 out of 34 aircraft have been inspected so far. Sources in Air India say both engines of the ill-fated aircraft were inspected 2 months ago and no issues were reported. In a statement, Air India said it is in the process of completing one-time safety checks as directed by the regulator. The Tata Group clarified it will provide compensation to all the victims of the air crash, including those who died on the ground. Here is the Aviation Minister on inspecting the Boeing 787 fleet.
We do have a very strict protocol, robust protocol, which we follow every time. But even after, when the incident happened, we also felt that there is a need to do an extended surveillance into the Boeing 787 series. So from the DGCA, we have also given an order to do the extended surveillance for the 787 planes. There are 34 in our Indian aircraft fleet today. I believe that 8 have already been inspected, and then with immediate urgency, all of them are going to be done.
Madhya Mujawar now reports from outside the BJD Medical College Hospital in Ahmedabad, where family members are waiting to collect the bodies of their dear ones.
Heartbreaking scenes at the BJD Medical College, where family members of the victims of the plane crash have gathered. They had given their DNA samples yesterday and they continue to wait to collect the mortal remains of their relatives. There are over 270 bodies that are kept inside the hospital, but only a few have been handed over to the families. Desperate family members are looking for answers. Some are sure that the bodies are inside. Some don't know if the bodies have even been recovered. We spoke to the father of 15-year-old Akash, who was sleeping near his tea stall when a burning wing of the plane crashed on him, leading to his death. The father is now awaiting to collect the mortal remains of his young son.
हम घर पे थे, मेरी बीबी चाय की किटली चला रही थी। मैं वहाँ पर चाय की किटली 40 साल से है और चाय की किटली चल रही थी। दोपहर को बज गया, खाने का टाइम हो गया था। मैंने लड़के को बोला तुम टिफिन लेकर दे मम्मी के पास जाओ। बोले कि अच्छा पापा। टिफिन लेकर छोकरे को वहाँ पे भेजा रोटी लेने का। और मैं ऑटो लेके पैसेंजर मिला तो मैं बाहर उतारने गया शाहीबाग के अंदर। बाहर उतारा और लड़का टिफिन देने के उसकी मम्मी खा रही थी और लड़का चाय पाई पर सो रहा था। और जैसे विमान आया एरोप्लेन उसका स्पॉट हुआ। ऐसा स्पॉट हुआ कि जाने काला धुआं निकलता था। सब देख रहे थे। मैं पीछे जाके देखा ऑटो चालू ऑटो के अंदर। मैंने क्या हुआ? मैंने बोला कुछ बड़ा स्पॉट हुआ है। पैसेंजर को उतार के यूँ टर्न मारा। मैं गाय अपने चाय की किटली पे पहुंचा। तब वो विमान का जो परखा है वो साला वहाँ के आगे लड़के के ऊपर पड़ा था। पक्का परखा जलता हुआ। बोला अभी जाए तो कौन जाए? मेरी बीवी बचाने गई क्योंकि जैसे उसको अग्नि जो लगी ना तो भी बग गई। उसने इतनी आग थी तो उसके पास कोई जा ही नहीं सकता। लड़का को लेके बीबी को लेके सील के अंदर आया। मेरा भतीजा था वो सील के अंदर आया। बीबी ऊपर है अभी दाखिल न लड़का मर चुका है।
Some lost their children and some lost their parents. It was heart-wrenching to see children like Pragya visit the crash site to find the mortal remains of her parents. They were in India for a visit and were headed to London to their home, but they were never destined to return. She said she was visiting the crash site to see what her parents would have gone through in their final moments.
कुछ नहीं बोल सकते, उधर कुछ भी नहीं था। क्या ही बोलूं, उसमें तो पूरा कुछ शब्द ही नहीं है मेरे।
आपकी कब बात हुई थी आपके माता पिता से लास्ट?
जब इधर आने वाले थे तभी बात हुई थी कि हम निकल रहे हैं, तेरा कुछ सामान बाकी है तो मुझे बोलते, मैं ले लेती हूँ या पार्सल करवा देते। उसके बाद फोन लगाया तो यह अच्छा हो गया।
हॉस्पिटल से क्या बोला है आपको? आपने अपना डीएनए सैंपल दिया था हॉस्पिटल में।
वो लोगों ने बोला है कि 72 आवर्स लग सकता है।
तो आप यहाँ क्रैश साइट पे क्यों आए? आपको ऐसे बताया गया था कि वहाँ पे नहीं है बॉडीज़ हॉस्पिटल में?
हम देखने आए थे कि कैसा इंसिडेंट था, वो लोगों ने कैसा मंजर देखा होगा।
A father who was planning a surprise visit for his daughter's baby shower in London didn't know that 12th June was going to be his last day. His brother tells us that he had come to drop him at the airport and spoke to him just minutes before the flight took off.
एयरपोर्ट छोड़ने के लिए आया था। ये छोड़ के मैं करीब 12:30 बजे में रिटर्न निकल गया था। तो खेड़ा के आसपास में पहुंचा था होटल पे। तो वहाँ मेरे को इंफॉर्मेशन मिला कि प्लेन क्रैश हुआ है। तो फिर हम डायरेक्ट वापस आ गए थे। जब मेरे भाई प्लेन में बैठा था सीट पर तब भी बात मेरी हुई थी उससे।
वो लंदन क्यों जा रहे थे, क्या आप फिर बता सकते हैं?
हाँ, उसकी भी अच्छी थी मेरे भाई की, मेरी भतीजी थी। उसका बहुत बड़ा ही था, बेबी शावर था संडे को। तो मेरी बच्ची को सरप्राइज़ देने के लिए जा रहा था। वो आ रहे बेबी शावर था तो बोल रहा था कि चल मेरी बच्ची को मैं सरप्राइज़ दूंगा। मैं तो सरप्राइज़ देने के लिए जा रहा था।
Like the lone passenger who miraculously survived, there were some lucky people who escaped death. Like Rashmin Chauhan, who says he was headed towards the hostel building and was just 5 seconds away when the plane crashed and exploded.
जो प्लेन क्रैश हुआ है, मेरी गाड़ी 50 फीट दूर थी, खाली 50 ही फीट, 50 मीटर नहीं 50 फीट दूर थी। और मैंने एकदम ब्रेक मार दिया। ब्रेक मार के मैंने गाड़ी खड़ी कर दी। तो मेरे गाड़ी के ऊपर टूटा हुआ प्लेन का जला हुआ मलबा मेरे कार के ऊपर आके गिरा। मैं जहाँ पे मेरी कार खड़ी थी वहाँ से राइट हैंड साइड पे बहुत बड़ा बिल्डिंग है, जो वहाँ जहाँ पे रेसिडेंस डॉक्टर रहते हैं, जिसके ऊपर ये प्लेन गिरा है। तो वो 4 मंजिला है। तो प्लेन कैसे गिरा वो नहीं पता है मेरे को, मगर आवाज़ जो है ना, अणुबॉम्ब जो फटता है, जैसे मैंने सुना है टीवी में या पढ़ा है कहीं, तो वो एहसास किया मैंने कि ये अणुबॉम्ब से भी ज़्यादा आवाज़ वाली बात ये प्लेन क्रैश में हुई। एक ही आवाज़ आया है, बहुत बड़ा आवाज़ आया है, मगर एक ही आवाज़ आया है। सीक्वेंस में कोई आवाज़ नहीं आया, एक ही आवाज़ आया सीधा।
और आपके आगे बहुत सारी गाड़ियां थी, लोग भी खड़े थे वहाँ पे?
मेरे आगे एक 2-3 एक्टिवा थे, तो मैंने वो एक्टिवा नीचे गिरे हुए देखे, उनके हेलमेट देखे, और कोई दूसरी बड़ी वाली गाड़ी नहीं थी। मेरे आगे वाली गाड़ी जितनी भी थी उसमें से कोई चीज़ मेरे को दिखी नहीं है। बाद में वो जलता हुआ सब उनके ऊपर ही पड़ा है। अब क्या हुआ होगा भगवान ऊपर वाला जाने, मेरे को दूसरा तो पता नहीं है उसका क्या हुआ होगा।
While investigating teams look into the black box to find out the actual cause of the crash, families of the victims, both on board and on the ground, are grappling with an unbearable reality of a nightmare that has come true.
Our thoughts and prayers with the families of those who have lost their lives in this terrible tragedy, this AI-171 crash. Let's move on to the other big story this evening. Iran has launched retaliatory strikes on Israel, leaving 3 people dead and dozens injured. Iran launched hundreds of ballistic missiles after Israel targeted Iran's nuclear sites, airports and military leadership. Some Iranian missiles breached Israel's Iron Dome, hitting buildings in Tel Aviv and other parts of the country. Israel's foreign minister has warned that Tehran will burn after the missile attack. The US said it helped Israel intercept these missiles. Speaking to the Wall Street Journal, President Trump said he was aware of Israel's plans to attack Iran. Trump spoke to Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday and described the strikes of Iran as excellent and successful. Iran says 78 people have died across the country after Israel's strikes. Israel claims to have killed top military commanders in Iran and also targeted airports. Israel also claims to have inflicted severe damage to 2 nuclear facilities. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei warned that Israel should expect severe punishment. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar spoke to foreign ministers of both Iran and Israel. India had expressed deep concern over the rising tensions in West Asia. Joining us to discuss this further is former Israeli government spokesperson Elon Levy and Umair Anas, a professor at the Yildirim Beyazıt University in Turkey. Umair, if I can come to you first. We're looking at a very disturbing, intense situation in the Middle East. Do you think we are going to possibly see an end to this escalation of tensions between Israel and Iran? Iran has struck back. Their operation is not over. Israel has now retaliated in turn. Do you think we're going to see an end to this in the next few days, or we're now looking at the possibility of a full-blown war between Iran and Israel?
I understood from Netanyahu's statements and his behavior in the last few years, we can say safely that this tension is far from over, and Netanyahu is going to launch many more airstrikes on Iran. And even though I think that Iran has many reasons to stop the war, Iran would request, and it has already requested, for example, with Saudi Arabia and other foreign ministers, Iranian counterparts, they are already talking. But I think that Israel has a mindset that they should complete the plan which they have in their mind, especially to eliminate all the possibilities of nuclear or the uranium enrichment program.
All right, let me get in Elon Levy at this point. Elon, now if we look at these pictures coming in from Israel, could you give us a sense of the extent of damage that has been caused by Iran's retaliatory attack against Israel? They launched drones and ballistic missiles as well.
Yeah, it was a sleepless night in Israel with 3 missile sirens and a massive Iranian ballistic missile barrage at Tel Aviv. But we're learning now that that was only a fraction of what Iran was planning. The New York Times reporting Iran planned to launch 1,000 ballistic missiles at Israel simultaneously, overwhelming its missile defenses and causing Armageddon, raining hellfire on Israeli civilian areas. They couldn't do it because Israel had already attacked Iran's ballistic missile bases. What Israel is doing now is degrading the Iranian regime's ability to continue waging its war of aggression against Israel. It is taking away Iran's ability to produce and fire ballistic missiles and to enrich the uranium that it is planning to use in order to build a nuclear weapon. So to answer the question you asked your previous guest as well, no, this is not over. This is just the beginning of Israel's campaign to neutralize the threat of the Iranian nuclear weapons program and the Iranian ballistic missile program. And it's going to take some time because those projects are enormous.
Right. Omer, if I were to ask you about the threat coming in from Iran, that it will strike Western powers if they come to the defense of Israel or they support Israel in this campaign. Now, we've seen the United States helping Israel in intercepting missiles from Iran. Do you think in this kind of atmosphere, there can be any talks regarding the nuclear deal? US and Iran were talking. They were supposed to have weekend talks as well. Donald Trump is telling them, just do it. Just have some sort of deal right now and stop everything. But is this going to work?
On your first question, Iran has already declared that any bases, any military base in Bahrain or in Qatar or in any other Gulf country is used to attack Iran, they are going to retaliate and they are going to target that air base, military base as well. On the question of coming back to dialogue and diplomacy, I think that diplomacy is the biggest victim of Israeli strikes because Iranian side had trusted completely on Trump's negotiation mechanism, and they were talking, even this week they were supposed to speak to each other. However, with this strike, Iranians' trust in Trump administration has completely gone down. And I think if there is going to be any sort of dialogue on a nuclear issue, it is going to be with European Union or the Middle Eastern countries. For sure, I don't think any possibility that Iranians are going to trust Donald Trump for this issue anymore.
Right. Elon, coming back to you, do you see any possibility of back-channel talks between Israel and Iran right now? Any possibility of a ceasefire? Can any other country, including India, play the role of a mediator? Because India has spoken to Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu, Prime Minister Modi has spoken, and India has offered all help to bring this conflict to an end as well.
Israel launched these attacks against the Iranian regime, understanding that this was the last chance, the last resort, the last possible minute before Iran begins to assemble a nuclear weapon, and therefore it had no choice. It also felt it had to attack Iran's ballistic missile facilities because Iran now has a few thousand ballistic missiles, maybe 2,000, and it's on course to build 20,000 in 6 years, and that would be an existential threat. The root of the conflict between Israel and Iran is that Israel wants to exist and the Iranian regime does not want Israel to exist. It keeps saying that Israel must be eradicated and destroyed, and that is why Israel fears what will happen if it gets weapons of mass destruction. There is a diplomatic way to end this conflict. The Iranian regime must agree to peacefully dismantle its nuclear program and its ballistic missile manufacturing and stop being a threat to Israel. But as long as it continues to say that Israel must be destroyed, and as long as it continues building the weapons to destroy Israel, then Israel has no choice but to meet that threat with force.
Right. Let me also go back to Omer at this point. Omer, where do you think the powers in the Middle East stand on this? This is a very critical situation. It could lead to a full-blown Middle East war. And this is what we've been actually worried about for the last 2 years, that if Israel and Iran go to war, then there's really no stopping things. Where do you think powers in the Gulf region, countries like Turkey, stand on this crisis?
You know, one of the biggest message of Israeli airstrikes is that Israel is behaving like a proxy of Western powers. And Israel is no longer, in the eyes of these countries, in the regional countries, as a civilized nation because of its indiscriminate use of force against civilians, against civilian infrastructure. And non-compliance of any diplomatic rules and discipline. Especially Turkey, I think, and including Saudi Arabia and Egypt, they are feeling threatened by Israel's irrational behavior. And for this reason, I think that as long as Netanyahu regime is there, they are not going to have any kind of a serious dialogue with Israel on any issue. And they are expecting some serious and peace-loving people in Israel to talk about that. You know, Saudi Arabia had already offered that they are ready to recognize the state of Israel in return of recognition for a Palestinian state and establishment of a Palestinian state. However, Israelis have misused all these opportunities and have rather spoiled the prospects of a peaceful region. So most of the countries in the region are going to, my fear is that there will be a kind of race for arms, and even for nuclear arms, not just in Iran, but also in other countries, because they are extremely, extremely threatened by Israel's irrational behavior.
Right. How would you respond to that, Elon? Because this would be, of course, causing a worry among a lot of countries, also in the Middle East, who are speaking to the United States about so many issues related to Middle East, about the Abraham Accords as well. How does this then one trust Israel with things like IMEC, things like the Abraham Accords, then also the relationship between US, Israel and them?
In the Middle East, we're used to leaders saying one thing in public and another in private. Publicly, Arab leaders are condemning the Israeli strikes against Iran. Privately, they're celebrating it. Israel, Saudi Arabia, the UAE all look at the Iranian regime as a common enemy. And that's because the Iranian regime has invested billions of dollars in building proxy armies around the Middle East that have destabilized the region, like Hezbollah that took over Lebanon, like the Houthis who took over Yemen and have attacked targets in Saudi Arabia and the UAE as well. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are also afraid of an Iranian nuclear weapons program, and they're privately relieved that Israel is doing their dirty work for them. Part of the reason that the October 7th war began with Hamas's massacre nearly 2 years ago was an attempt to destabilize the peace and normalization process in the Middle East. And therefore, removing that malign Iranian influence opens the way for more peace and normalization accords in the region because they cannot foil it. And it is in fact the threat of an Iranian nuclear weapon that would have sparked an arms race across the region, as countries like Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Egypt would have felt they needed to build their own nuclear bombs to protect themselves from a hostile and aggressive Iranian regime. And if Israel is able to neutralize the Iranian nuclear project, it will forestall the threat of a nuclear arms race in the Middle East.
Right. My final question to you, Omar. As of now, the International Atomic Energy Agency has said that they've not seen any signs of radiation. According to you, how much damage would the Israel strikes, missile strikes, air strikes, would have been able to cause to Iran's nuclear capabilities? Also, there have been reports that Iran has spent many years strengthening its nuclear facilities with very special concrete, which cannot be penetrated easily. Do you think Israel would have been able to make a lot of impact so far?
I think yes, because the kind of intelligence which Israel relied on and has launched strikes on very pinpointed targets, I think that there is significant damage to Iranian nuclear facilities all over Iran. However, at the same time, I would say that Iranians were prepared for these kind of strikes. And as previously we know that Iranians have distributed their entire nuclear program in geographically distant places. So there is a possibility of a slight delay. However, if they would like to start their nuclear program again, I think that they are very much in position to restart their program. my fear is that after these attacks and after the failure of diplomacy, there will be strong nationalist demands within Iran to revise the nuclear doctrine, according to which they thought that Islam does not allow use of or having nuclear weapons. But the nationalists in Iran, they would say that it is time to have a nuclear bomb. So if these nationalists are going to have power, then my fear is that the nuclear weapon, having a nuclear weapon, will be very much in political acceptance in Iran.
Right. Thank you very much, Omar and Elon Levy, for joining us. Clearly a very important developing story there, something that concerns India very, very much as well. Thanks once again for being with us. Before we wrap, a quick look at all the headlines once again. At least 270 bodies recovered after the Ahmedabad Air India crash. The agonizing wait for grieving families continues as authorities work on matching DNA samples before returning the bodies. The government orders a high-level probe into the Air India crash led by Union Home Secretary. Aviation Minister says the probe will be completed within 3 months. The government launches inspection of the Boeing 787 fleet in India. Aviation Minister says 8 out of 34 aircraft inspected so far. Sources in Air India say both engines of the ill-fated aircraft were inspected 2 months ago and no issues were reported. Iran strikes back at Israel with hundreds of ballistic missiles. This after Israel targeted nuclear sites in Iran and killed top military commanders. 3 people killed in Israel. Tehran says 78 people have died due to Israeli strikes, including children. US helps Israel intercept missiles from Iran. President Trump says he was aware of Israel's plans to attack Iran. Israel warns Tehran will burn after the retaliatory strikes. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set to attend the G7 summit in Canada. He will visit Cyprus tomorrow and will also visit Croatia in a few days. After multiple delays, the Axiom 4 mission is set for liftoff on the 19th of June. The mission will carry Indian astronaut Shubhanshu Shukla and 3 others to the International Space Station. South Africa pull off a stunning upset to be crowned World Test Champions, beat Australia by 5 wickets at Lord's after a remarkable century by Aiden Markram. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of India Business Hour. Thank you for watching. News continues right here on CNBC-TV18.
Present